Good afternoon, and welcome to the December 3rd, 2013 meeting of the Washington County Board of Education. Today, as the superintendent of school, I'm going to convene this meeting until the board election is taken. But before we begin that, we would like to have the Pledge of Allegiance delivered by Adam Tice, who's a 5th grade student at Old Forge Elementary School. Adam, would you come forward, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Congress is racing to make changes to the bill that would make it illegal to create plastic guns. Many Democrats, law enforcement officials, and gun control advocates.
Thank you, Adam. So, Adam, do you have anybody here today that you'd like to introduce to us?
This is my mom, Dawn Tice, and that's my principal, Mrs. Peak.
Thank you, and thank you. Adam, you know, you've traveled a long way from Old Forge, and I know it's a great school, but is there a subject that you like the most there?
Probably reading.
Probably reading. Yay. All right. Have you read any good books lately?
Probably The Tale of Despereaux and City of Orphans.
Outstanding. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming and representing your school so well. We really do appreciate it. Now we're going to send you back to school. You thought this was an afternoon off, huh? No. Thank you very much, and thank you, Mom, for bringing him. Thank you, Miss. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda as submitted?
Mr. Superintendent, I move for the approval of the agenda.
The agenda has been moved, and it is seconded by?
Second.
Thank you very much. The next item is the approval of the minutes.
We need to vote.
Oh, we did. Well, we all agreed. May we please vote on the approval of the minutes? Agenda is what I said. Thank you very much.
It's a harder job than it looks like, isn't it?
It is for me today, I can tell you that. I'll be happy to hand this over to someone. The agenda has been moved, seconded, and approved by the board. We'll now move to the approval of the minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Superintendent, I move for the adoption of minutes from the Tuesday, November the 19th, 2013 meeting, a closed session set of minutes the same day, and then the regular business meeting on Tuesday, November the 19th. I'd like to move for adoption of those minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Mrs. Fisher. We will vote on these. Do I have approval of the minutes? Thank you. The minutes have been approved. Now, as my term comes to a completion, we will move into a serious item for the board, and this is the board's reorganization. First, we are looking at the election of the president for the upcoming school year. Do we have a motion for president of the school board?
Mr. Superintendent, I would like to nominate Dr. Hardings as president of the board for next year.
Mrs. Fisher has nominated Dr. Hardings. Are there any other nominations? Seeing none, we will close nominations and call for a vote. Those who would like to see Dr. Justin Hardings be the board president, please signify by raising your right hand. It is a unanimous decision with the student concurring. Congratulations, Dr. Hardings. This brings us to the second item, which is the Board of Education Reorganization's election of the vice president. The nominations are now open for the office of vice president. Do we have a nomination?
Mr. Superintendent, I would like to nominate Donna Brightman for vice president.
Mr. Bailey, thank you for your nomination of Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
It's seconded by Mr. Ridenauer. Are there any others? Okay. Seeing that there are no other nominations, the nominations are now closed. May I please see a vote by raise of your right hand to support Mrs. Brightman as vice president? It's unanimous with the student concurring. Congratulations, Mrs. Brightman. Mr. President, I'll now turn the agenda back to you in your capable hands.
A job well done. So next on the agenda is public comment. We do have two individuals who have signed up to speak, Denise Fry and Anne Marie Hines. You can speak together or in sequence, or however you'd like to do it is fine.
In sequence it.
That clarified it for me. Well, welcome. It's nice to have you with us. We look forward to hearing from you.
Is this on?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox, and board members. My name is Anne Marie Hines, and I am president of the Washington County Educational Support Personnel Association, representing almost 450 staff members in Washington County Public Schools. ESPs work diligently in our schools to provide the highest level of services for not only the students, but for parents, other WCPS staff, and county stakeholders. ESPs are essential to the education process. We are very often the first line of contact with students and parents. We safely transport thousands of students every day to and from school. We maintain and clean school facilities and provide nutritious meals for our children. Our paraprofessionals provide necessary supports for teachers in classroom instruction. In short, we keep schools safe for students, parents, and staff. One may even say we are the face of WCPS. Our bar is set pretty high. The well-being of every student depends on our dedication to our work. This is why I come before you today to encourage you to seek improved funding for our school system. We have an obligation to the students of Washington County to provide the resources necessary for a world-class education. Resources that include not just physical, but also human capital. As you well know, these resources do not come cheap, and they increase in cost every year. Maintenance of effort is a phrase recited most often when discussing funding of our school system. But at a point, thresholds are reached on what we can expect if we continue to ask year after year just for maintenance of effort. Our organization is united with WCTA in support of increasing our funding, and we urge you to seek funding above maintenance of effort. We cannot continue to remain comfortable with the notion that maintaining equals growth. Expectations for student achievement are higher than ever, and in order to prepare next generations, we should not settle for the status quo. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Hardings, Dr. Wilcox,
Good afternoon.
Board of Ed members. My name is Denise Fry. I'm president of the Washington Association, representing 1,700 plus Unit 1 members in Washington County Public Schools. In the coming weeks and months, you will be working on to draft the system's financial budget for FY15. We acknowledge that the task before you is great and that you do not enter into this lightly. You are aware of the many academic and instructional demands and needs facing our system as we transition into new curriculums, seek to address new technologies, and strive to prepare students for the 21st century. The system has and continues to move forward and to make good motion in meeting these needs. These are valuable investments that will benefit our students, and we know that we can agree that our students and our community deserve the best that we as a system can provide. We also know that these investments, which ensure the highest quality public education available, come at a cost. As the elected leaders of our school system, you are charged with developing a budget that meets the needs of our system and to seek adequate funding for the budget that you develop. We encourage you to develop a plan which will allow investment in our school system that will keep our system strong and allow us to meet the instructional, programming, infrastructural needs, and most importantly, the challenges facing the system's most important resource, its dedicated employees. Investments in our system are investments in our future and the future of our community. We encourage you to weigh the needs of the system and to develop a budget that reflects its true needs, even if these needs outreach the funding that is available to you from maintenance of effort. We are committed to working with you in the coming months to seek these adequate and needed funds. A recent guest editorial in the Herald Mail summed up the value of this investment better than my words could ever. Phrases along the lines of, without the foresight of many visionaries who have in the past and continue to fund education in our county at high levels. And we get what we pay for. We thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Ms. Fry. Thank you, Ms. Hines. Any brief response from board members?
Do you know if MSEA is going to be working to support the proposed new Blue Ribbon Commission, which is basically Thornton 2,
Yes.
where their main thrust
It is one of
will
their
be
3
adequacy?
legislative priorities.
Good, because it's one of ours as well, as far as under the adequate and equitable funding. Some of those formulas disadvantage
Yes, they do.
Washington County, so that's an opportunity for you to partner with us and others to see if we can find some more money. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Any other? Ms. Harshman?
I'd just like to say thank you, and I appreciate your concern, and we too, I'm sure, all of us are concerned. Hopefully, we can do something that will improve the situation, because you are our greatest assets.
Anybody else? Thank you, Ms. Fry. Thank you, Ms. Hines. Is there anybody else who would like the opportunity to speak? Those are the only 2 who have signed up. All right, we'll move on to old business then. First item under old business is consideration of the second read to rescind a number of policies from the B section. Mr. Trotta?
On November 19th, the first reading of the proposed rescission of 12 policies that appear in Section D of the policy manual was presented and approved by the Board of Education. Since the first reading, a public notice was placed on board docs and members of the public were invited to provide comments. We have not received any comments. At this time, the Policy Committee is requesting the Board of Education's approval of the rescission of these 12 policies. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Trotta. Is there a motion regarding the second read on these 12 policies?
Mr. President, do you want the policy letters and title read, or are the letters sufficient?
I think maybe we'll just stick with letters. Is that okay for our note taker over there in minutes?
All right, then I am happy to move that we rescind policy BB, policy BBA, policy BBB, policy BBA, BBC, policy BBD, BBE, BCAB, BCAC, BCD, BDDD, and BDDF. Those items are all spoken to in Maryland law and are unnecessary in our policy manual.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Brightman. Is there any discussion? There's no discussion. The question is on the approval of the second read to rescind the policies listed. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next item on the agenda is new business, the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Michaels.
Good afternoon, President Hardings, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox. I think Lisa will probably be joining me in a few minutes and can give you much greater detail. But we're here today to present a number of bids to be awarded under the consent agenda. There are 7 in total. The recommendation is for security system for the new central office system. This includes swipe card devices, cameras, other access pieces of equipment for $77,863. Also, we have an opportunity to renew our asbestos abatement on a per-unit cost contract. This was bid last year, and we're making that recommendation based on the per-unit costs. We don't know at this point how often or how much asbestos will be removed next year, but it's the same bid as last year. We have 10 multi-copiers, or 10 copiers with multi-functions that we're recommending to be purchased. Part of what we're going to do is use the current contract that we have. We're going to buy out 77 copiers, I believe it is, or 72 copiers, own them ourselves, renew a contract for maintenance on those copiers. And we're trying to work to a point that we have all of our copiers in the system on the same contract, which is 2 years away. These 10 copiers will be part of the central office. They'll have new functions and will better address the multi-needs of the central office facility.
And Mr. Michaels, before you go on, Lisa, is there a change to that copier piece that I saw float across just a moment ago?
Yes, with the board's permission, I would like to request that we postpone action on the copier's recommendation today to the December 17th board meeting. I did learn about a cooperative bid where we can save a little more money than we were recommending today, and I'd like a little more time to explore that and just make sure that when we make the acquisition recommendation, that it is for the best value that's available to the
Will we still be
system.
purchasing, though, because Mr. Michaels had indicated that we'd still purchase those for $1 or something?
Yes, we still recommend moving forward with acquiring those copiers under the lease that we currently have for $1 per unit. We're waiting for the firm quote for the cost of maintenance, supplies, and services, as well as to try to make sure that when we sign a new lease that we're taking advantage of the lowest prices that are available to us.
So you have to help me because I think I'm kind of like Boyd. Are we asking the board to hold up on the entire copier purchase, or are we going to purchase the $1 portion and then wait up on the new lease agreements?
It would be my recommendation that we go ahead and make the decision to purchase those copiers today, and then I can come back on the 17th and let you know what the recommendation is for the acquisition of the new copiers.
Okay, thank you.
Just so I'm clear, so that when we get to the motion and whoever makes the motion is clear. In the recommended motion, it says to purchase 73 existing OCE copiers for $1 each. That's what you're recommending to keep in.
Yes.
And it says then, comma, and purchase maintenance service/supplies only through June 30, 2015. Is that the portion that we're taking out?
Keep that in.
Keep that in as well. And then take out to approve a lease for 10 multifunction copiers.
Yes, please.
It's just that lease part on
Yes,
the 10.
please.
We got it.
All right. So Mr.
Apologize
Michaels,
for that.
We follow simple instructions well.
So Mr. Michaels, you were doing adequately well, so do you want to continue on? Or you want to take
I'll be glad to pass the lease.
Last item are the wireless arrays for the new administrative center, utilizing the same good unit prices that we have in the past, and standardizing throughout the school system to the Xeris wireless arrays. Any questions that you might have for me?
Is there a motion regarding the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move to approve the purchase of a security system for the administrative center to Atlantic Security Systems, Inc. at $77,863, to renew the contract for asbestos abatement to Asbestos Specialist, Inc. and Waco, Inc. at the bid unit prices, to purchase 73 existing OCE copiers for $1 each, and purchase maintenance service and supplies only through June 30th, 2015, to upgrade the automated substitute system to eSchool Solutions at $19,648.97 for the balance of this year and $18,255 for the 2014-15 school year, to approve requisition 167153 and 167152 to Hartford Computer Group, Inc. for 100 laptop and 100 desktop computers at $58,800 and $45,400 respectively, and requisition 167122 for wireless arrays to Cirrus at $86,608.
Motion by Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any questions or any discussion on the consent agenda? Mrs. Brightman?
I'm sure I'm confused by this, but on number 2, the asbestos abatement renewal for call services, the bid 2013-16. I looked back on the November 19th consent agenda, and at that point we did another with the same company, awarded another bid for 17 separate purchase orders for $463,000, and then it references the established bid of 2013-16 as if it already was in existence. And I guess I'm wondering why we're voting on that one when it was referenced 2 weeks earlier. Did I mistrack? Am I misinterpreting this a little bit?
2013 was when the board initially approved the per unit cost for the asbestos abatement, and that's what we've been using throughout the system as we find asbestos or hazardous materials. So that's the original bid. What we're asking you to vote on today is renewal of that original bid.
And it's the same number. It doesn't like
what you acted on in November was the collective costs for just the new central administration building, the asbestos abatement. That work was performed under this bid, but those were specific tasks that had been awarded to ASI, one of these two companies.
So I guess my confusion is that the bid number doesn't change from year to year, it remains the same.
Yes, that's correct. On this, these are called term contracts.
Okay.
They run for an indefinite period of time, and orders are placed as needed throughout the contract period. The underlying unit rates are all fixed, but the price...
It seemed like we would renew the unit fixed price before applying it to a new one, but anyway, that's fine. It just seemed out of sequence.
Well, it was actually the board approved this a year ago, initially as a new bid.
So let me see if I can help. The contract that we approved a year ago set rates and prices. We performed operations using that contract to remove asbestos at the new facility.
Correct.
We are now saying that the 2013 contract should be renewed for 2014. The purchase order number does not, or the requisition does not change because all the terms and conditions are rolling forward for 2014. So,
Got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there other questions on the consent agenda? Mrs. Fisher?
Could you help me understand the bid for the automated substitute employee management system upgrade? There seems to be a charge just for the remainder of this year, I believe for $19,000 some odd dollars. But we're going to purchase the system for next year at the same price. Why does it cost the same thing for a few months?
Well, we're actually implementing a new software. And this is the same company that we've currently been working with for our automated substitute management system. They're actually going to have to deploy resources and technical staff to assist us with the upgrade to this new piece of software. So there are some additional costs associated with that that are not recurring annual costs. It's an implementation cost of making the upgrade. We do have a small credit for some service that's already been paid this year under the existing contract we have for a substitute system. So we do have an offsetting credit I don't know if you spotted that in the schedule, but that really explains the differential between the two.
We wouldn't be better off waiting, just using our existing system for the next
There's some new
couple of months
functionalities that we're required to implement to track employees, I believe at this point, that may work 30 hours or more as substitutes because of some new federal guidelines.
Okay.
There is that piece of the Affordable Care Act to track that, but also our current system is no longer maintainable. The company has said, literally, you're the last district in the country using it, and we can no longer maintain it for you. So the upgrade does have one-time costs. There's a 2-day workshop with IT staff, payroll, all of us, and materials to train employees so that it's a seamless implementation from the employee side.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Bailey?
Glad to see Mr. Hamlet come back in. I think he might have the answer. On the laptops and the desktop computers, the inventory within the inventory of computers, what approximately what number of computers do we have in the system now for student use?
All total, we're a little over 12,000. Combination of desktops and laptops. And we're a little over 5,000 on iPads, tablets.
We have a goal in mind?
Right now, we're working on replacing, we're not adding to, we're replacing units that are beyond repair. Our desktops are in that 7-8 year range right now. So we basically replace 100 to 150 units per month that are beyond repair.
That's why the board's seeing about every other month or every other meeting, you're seeing this 100 desktops, 100 laptops, or one or the other showing up on the board agenda.
Thank you. That was the information I was requesting.
Mrs. Williams?
Yes, I wanted to ask about the copiers, the 73 that we're buying for $1. Are they all approximately the same age, or they are the same age? And they are. And what typically is the life of a copier?
But I think the good news in this, while we're buying them for $1, it's that service contract. We know the flat amount that it's going to cost us to maintain service with that. And I think it also includes some of the toner with some of the copiers. So we know what our cost is going to be moving forward with. If we were just buying them and we were absorbing the full risk of, maintaining the copier, we might pick and choose. We might, as they, have a certain type of failure, might get rid of them or something like that. But for less money, the combination of buying these and the service contract and the new information that Ms. Freeman has, in total, will have less cost involved in where we're at right now in our current lease agreement.
Typically, the longest lease for a copier is 60 months. They don't like to lease them beyond 60 months. They do encourage that you replace after 60 months. It's just that these OSAs are particularly hard work horses, and they really don't have a lot of maintenance costs associated with a lot of repairs. So I feel that the quality of the equipment is such that we can afford to continue to operate them outside of that 60-month period.
Thank you.
Are there other questions?
Can we go back to computers? What do we do with the ones that we retire?
They're recycled.
Do we get any, trade-in for them, or?
I think that I don't know if Arnold's still here, but I think sometimes we do and sometimes we don't. I think it depends on the precious metal market and some things. So.
Correct. It's precious metal market that drives what we get paid for them. But we have gotten paid for all our recycling for the last 4 years. It does not cost us any money to recycle.
Okay. Good.
Other questions? If not, the question's on the approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item under new business is the first reading of policy IGDK, participation on athletic teams and extracurricular activities. Dr. Marco.
Good afternoon, Dr. Harding, board members, Dr. Wilcox. The Policy Committee conducted a review of this policy during its public work session conducted on November 26, 2013. As a result of that review, the Policy Committee is recommending that certain sections that now appear in the policy should instead be addressed in an administrative regulation. The Policy Committee is recommending that the most of the last 4 paragraphs, which address the role of the head coach and the school principal, and the types of violations that could result in the suspension of extracurricular activities, should be deleted from the policy and placed in an administrative regulation.
Is there a motion to approve the first reading of policy IGDK?
Mr. President, I move for the adoption of IGDK, the participation on athletic teams and extracurricular activities.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
Second, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Ritenour. Discussion. Mr. Bailey? You're right to speak first, if you like.
The policy has been edited, and the changes, I think, are apropos. In the parts that have been deleted certainly didn't need to be there. So I support the policy.
Any other comments, Ms. Brighton?
Just a question, thinking to the new student discipline and the code of conduct. Is there some thought that these type of extracurricular activities and the way we've handled that in the past is going to be impacted by those 2 items coming forward? Mr. Trotta, any thoughts on that?
Yes.
Yes.
This is one of the key points that the policy committee members discussed, and that is, in light of the proposed changes to the current disciplinary code, which we anticipate will be enacted in some form, that it will relate to what now appears in the policy. It's better to place that language that's now in the policy in administrative regulation, because when those new regulations are administered by the state, we can go back and re-examine the regulations. We have greater flexibility to amend the regulations than we do the policy.
Do you think the first 4 paragraphs, the philosophy stated, might be altered by those same 2 state documents? Or do you think we just go with this and with the idea that at some point we may have to revisit?
I think the approach that we will take is that we'll see precisely what the state decides to enact, and once that is issued, we will then go back and look at this particular policy and the administrative regulation and make some determination in consultation with the policy committee as to whether, number 1, the policy has to be changed, and number 2, if they have any recommendations on the administrative regulation.
Would this leave any gap between what's happening now and anything new? Or if we pass these changes, do we leave a void in case a situation comes up? Are we still covered? I guess the handbook is still out there. How would we?
I do not believe that there would be a gap. The approach that we would take is that once the board takes action, if it does take action at the second reading on the policy, we would already have the regulation ready to proceed to take this language and put it in administrative regulation. So I do not perceive of any gaps. This has been effective as far as the administration of this particular policy goes. We do from time to time have issues that do arise at the school level where we must consult with the school principal, the athletic division, and examine the policy to determine the appropriate action that should be taken. And this policy has proven to be effective whenever we have had a situation arise.
But there is a due process and appeal process that this could trigger, so I just wanted to be sure we're not in between. If we've got something ongoing right now, whether this leaves us.
We currently do not have any active matters at this time. We want to see a seamless transition once action is taken by the board on the policy. But I just want to assure you that if we had any situation arise, that we always do offer a due process. It's just a part of our normal business practices at the school level and also at the central office level whenever there is any type of action that's going to be taken.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mrs. Williams?
In your explanation, I was relieved to hear that there would be an administrative regulation, because as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, what is the policy? I'm seeing rationale for policy, but what is, in fact, the policy? So I'm wondering, do we need a sentence in there that mentions these things are spelled out in administrative regulations?
We certainly can. If that's the pleasure of the board, we can certainly indicate that the superintendent is authorized to promulgate administrative regulations to carry out the policy.
Ms. Rodman?
Go ahead.
No, I just have a follow-up question. When we're looking at policy right now, in the idea of what's a uniform way. Is there an assumption or an understanding that when you have a policy and there's something attached to it, it's an exhibit or a regulation? Or, I mean, it's a valid point. Should we always attach a standard statement at the bottom that says, please reference regulations? How have we done that?
I think most of them have something similar to what Tony said, which is, I think it may be an oversight or whatever, but the fact that we've scratched out these recognizing that they were going to be regulations, that sentence had not yet been attached to it. But I think the overwhelming, at least the ones that I've looked at, almost all of them that have a regulation attached to it, says
reference
that.
It in
yes,
the
references
I
the
haven't noticed that.
The superintendent
so, okay.
will. Did you have something else?
No.
I'm just looking, and it's not a big deal, and I really don't care either way, but I didn't want to. The second and third paragraphs, I mean, it's obviously a statement of philosophy. And I'm just, every time I read it, I'm wondering, do we really need that? As we write our policies, to me, less is more in a lot of ways, because if you just are specific to the fact that, students on comprise whatever, I think the key one is, the key part of the whole policy, participation on an athletic team or extracurricular activities is regarded as a privilege. Okay, and students who choose are subject to reasonable rules of conduct and training. In violation of these rules, blah, 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 blah. To me, that's about all you need. I think the rest of it is almost superfluous. It's just, it sounds nice, but I'm not sure it's really necessary in a policy. So if I may, if this moves on, and we'll obviously go back to the policy committee, I would just ask the members of the policy committee to consider what I've said here in regards to this. Is it really something we need? Or can we streamline it to a point that if a person goes in and looks at participation on athletic teams, they know, okay, you're going to have rules and you're subject to rules. And those rules are spelled out in the regulations. And I think, again, short and sweet sometimes really works a lot better, particularly for something like this. Because kids and parents, the first thing they're going to do is look and see, is there a policy? What are the regulations? And this would would direct them right to it, and the bottom of it would direct them right to the regulations. So I would ask that of my colleagues on the policy committee to take a look at that.
Policy is meeting next Tuesday, and this, I believe, is on the agenda. So our intent was to bring this back on the 17th, as well as the discussion of the grading policy, and have it all together at the same meeting. So I think we can certainly discuss it next Tuesday. And I'd add on the question of whether you write specifically into the policy that the superintendent is authorized to write regulation. I think that phrase must have been a throwback to when the board wrote policy, or wrote regulations, which we changed maybe 4 years ago, not long after I came on the board. So it may have been before that, when it was the board's normal practice to write regulations, that in cases where they wanted the superintendent to write the regulation, you had to write into the policy that the superintendent would do it. And this is a discussion, as you said, for perhaps another time, but my feeling is it's the board's job to write policy, and it's a given that the superintendent writes the regulation. But we can certainly have that discussion as part of our workshop.
I'm just thinking that in paper, the regulations would follow this policy. Online, I believe, you access the policies, and then on the pull-down window, you would have to go then to exhibits and regulations. So in looking at the policy, if you read through the policy and there's no mention of the regulations, then you would know to go to the other place on that pull-down menu to find the regulations. I just would offer the suggestion just to put that sentence there, but that's where they're addressed.
Did you have something?
Well, I was just about to say what you were about to say, that online, it's like you read the policy and then you think, oh, that's it. But then you have to go and look in the regulations, and there's usually more that goes with it. So I think it is important to have that, at least a reference to the regulation if that regulation is created.
And maybe even a link to it right on that page, so you immediately go down to it.
Now that I don't know if there is a link. I don't think there is.
There isn't.
There isn't.
Is there any other discussion on the motion to approve policy IGDK? If not, all those who are in favor of the first read? Are there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next item under new business is a gift to Boonesboro High School in the amount of $15,500.
Good afternoon, President Hardings, members of the board, Dr. Wilcox, Mr. Akers. Thank you. I never got a reply. I'm here on behalf of Boonesboro High School to request that you accept a donation of $15,000 from a very generous anonymous donor. The money's to be used for the band, orchestra, and drama programs at Boonesboro High School.
Thank you, Mr. Akers. Is there a motion to approve the gift in the amount of $15,500?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. Is there any discussion? If not, all those in favor of accepting the gift? Is there any opposed? The motion passes 7-0. The student member concurs. And please, whoever it is, somebody who has to know who the anonymous donor is, would you please extend our thanks to them for their commitment to Boonesboro?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Next item under new business is consideration of the 2014-2015 Program of Studies. Dr. Domain?
Good afternoon, President Hardings, Vice President Brightman, members of the board, and Dr. Wilcox. We are asking your consideration of approval for the 2014-2015 Program of Studies. November 12th, the Curriculum and Instruction Committee met and discussed the changes that you will see on the slide presentation that we have prepared for you, just to give you an overview. There are certain changes that had to happen with course titles and course offerings. This was our timeline for preparing the program of studies and scheduling again in November. Recommendations were made by staff for those additions, deletions, and changes. We provided a draft revision booklet for staff to again approve. Then we forwarded this booklet to the Curriculum and Instruction Committee for their review and also approval. Here, we are now here asking your approval for those changes. In January, we will meet with principals and with counselors as well to make sure that they understand those changes that we are hoping that you will approve on today. And then in February and March, school counselors will begin the scheduling process for our high school students. We have a list of courses that have been eliminated, and all changes that you see, whether it's courses that have been eliminated, courses that have been added, they've been done for specific reasons. One may be to align with the course titles that have been approved by the State Department of Education. So we may have had just some titles that did not match with the state's course listings. So that's why some changes have been made. Others may have been made, other course changes may have been made to expand our offerings such that we make sure that we are addressing the needs that have now arisen because of the Maryland state standards. So this slide and the next show you, again, courses that have been eliminated. We had a few questions, I know, at the instruction in curriculum and instruction committee meeting regarding some of the languages, world languages that we are not offering. Mr. Akers explained at that time it's due to low student interest at times, and just trying to find, when you have low numbers of students who are interested in pursuing courses, then of course it provides to be, or it proves to be difficult to find staff for those low numbers as well. But other than that, those are the reasons that, again, those courses have been eliminated. We had quite a few changes, actually, in the area of career and technical education. Mr. Phillips took a look at those classes, and again, he wanted to make sure that the courses that we are offering were also in alignment with the states. And then we have one program title change. We're familiar with this. Our old program, Essence, is now included in our early college program. So again, just a program title change that we wanted to make you aware of in the program of studies.
Mr. President, I apologize. Can I ask a question before we get too far? Rick,
Sure.
Would you, Mr. Akers, would you back up right there? One more, bring it forward. I'm looking at a couple of these, and a lot of those, starting with horticultural science, I think a lot of those things were courses that, were utilized by, the academy up at Clear Spring High School. I mean, what's the rationale? Is it because of, we have a pretty good number of kids, I think, in that program.
Yeah, those actually represent changes more than eliminations. Sometimes we had multiple courses where the actual content of the curriculum were very close, but they had two different names. So in those cases, one of them was eliminated. In some cases, some of the concepts that were taught in two different courses have been brought together. And then in these CTE, a lot of them are really just name changes so that we're aligned with the pathways that lead to completer programs at MSDE. So it's really a whole combination of things, but this doesn't represent the loss of any course. It's mostly a name change or combining of curriculum or recombining of curriculum.
Well, let me just give you an example. Nursery landscape management. And that's a pretty specific course. So if you combine and give it, if you're combining it with something, aren't you watering it down to a certain degree? If that's was a semester course or a year-long course, and now it has a different name and different, some other items have been added to it.
It is actually a new course. You'll see that's level a few slides later. That is actually a new course, Landscape Design and Management.
All right, yeah, I probably did.
So it's still, it's captured. It's been expanded again.
All right. There's a couple later.
I think that's still at Tech.
Yeah.
And this has been, for a few years, a process from the CTE department at MSDE has really, I think, gone through a process of updating some of their programs to, I guess, use more current language. But in reality, they're fairly subtle changes to the actual curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
And there you can see some course title changes that have taken place. And, as Mr. Akers has said, not necessarily eliminating, but simply aligning the course titles with those that have been approved. Again, we have quite a few of those that that have simply changed title. Still course title changes. All right. And the new courses added, you will see here where some of those old titles, the content has been captured. And again, you just saw Mr. Ridenauer's, the one that he asked about landscape being eliminated, but then here it is captured in the new course.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Kind of going along with Mr. Ridenauer's question and what you just said, realizing that some courses have been, just the title has been changed and they perhaps have been combined. Have we lost any completely in those areas of horticulture, landscape, all those?
No, there's been no loss of completeness.
Total elimination?
No, there's been no loss.
Okay.
In CTE, there's been no loss of completeness.
Okay, thank you.
Question. I love the discussion about landscape design and horticulture, so I'm just going to prolong this a little bit more. Do we offer any certification for completion of any of these? Do we group any together that might build a certification? Is there an apprenticeship component? I see we took the apprenticeship out of the construction phase and now it's just carpentry 1 and 2. And I know that we're doing the middle college and I may be sort of infringing on HCC turf here, which I'm okay with. But the certification, isn't there some possibility that we could do some trade and technical certification? We used to do Cisco certification. So I'm looking at, I know there's soil and erosion certification because I've taken them, but are there some ways we can tie in with these students to give them something else to take home with their diploma?
And we do, I can't say specifically to that particular program, but as much as possible, I think we've gotten pretty close to most of our CTE programs as part of MSDE's expectation that we find ways to assess student progress in those programs. One of the ways that we have done that is through certification tests. So, I could certainly find out for you if that's one of the programs where we've done that.
And again, I would add any of the trades or technical programs. I think we missed an opportunity to do another layer of certification over and above a CTE diploma.
Yeah, I think, for example, when you look at like some of our culinary arts programs, that we are looking at the ProStart certifications, which are industry-based certification. I know that there are advanced certificates in some of the handlings of chemicals and things for turf and landscape management. Our construction trades programs, I think they'll be offering at some point OSHA 10, OSHA 30 certifications, which will help area builders with the certification requirements that they have for some of these young people in terms of their insurances and training. So I think you'll see that be more and more a part of really the overall review of our CTE offerings, but also some of our other offerings as well.
Thank you.
I just said, one of the issues that we face as a K-12 system is oftentimes the certifications, kids can't sit for the exams till their 18th birthday. So they'll go through our program, and they won't be able to be certified while they're still with us.
Oh, there is an age
There
barrier.
are in some areas. There are in some areas. But we'll talk to you about that a little bit more as some of this matures.
The next set of slides deal specifically with changes at Barbara Ingram School for the Arts. Again, similar course changes that have been made, courses eliminated, some courses added. Dr. Miles has worked closely with VISPA to more closely reflect the content of those courses that are being offered there, and I know that he worked very closely with the principal to be sure that those titles also were in alignment with the state. So those are the courses that have been eliminated. And the next slide shows those course titles that have been changed. Again, we aren't losing anything as far as content is concerned, but we are, I think, expanding some offerings within the context of those courses, as well as adding some new courses. These are the changes that we have asked the committee to review and that we're bringing to you for consideration. And we ask for your approval.
Thank you, Dr. Domain. Is there a motion to approve the program of studies for 2014-2015?
Mr. President, I move to accept the changes or the program of studies for 2014-15.
Thank you, Mr. Ridenhour. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Mrs. Fisher. Is there further discussion, Mrs. Fisher?
I notice on BISFA in particular, some of the new courses added have very vague titles. For instance, Advanced Craft and Practice, or just Craft and Practice, Senior Seminar, Senior Workshop, whereas the titles that have been eliminated seem to have been much more specific. Is there a reason for going to such general titles? I mean, what is Craft and Practice?
If I remember this conversation with Dr. Miles correctly, this course specifically has to deal with drama. This is in the area of drama, and so students will be exposed to the full spectrum of everything that goes into the directing, the building of the sets, costuming, everything that goes into the production of those classes. I think it gives the teacher more flexibility, giving the teacher the opportunity to offer students just a wider range of experience in that course. And again, it aligns with course titles that have been approved by the state.
It seems that if it's specifically in theater, then it should say Craft and Practice in drama or in theater or something. I mean, somebody reading this on a transcript, how do you know what it's involved with?
I will inquire with Dr. Miles if there is a reason that he did not pick a more specific or that they did not select a more specific title.
And I would just add that I think some of that may be due to the fact that students at Barbara Ingram sometimes take like a rotation among a variety of teachers, the adjunct teachers that we hire, and so the combination may not be exactly the same for every student, that there's a little opportunity to pick and choose. I don't know if that would explain why it's a more general term, but as Dr. Domain said, we'll certainly check with Dr. Miles and confirm that. But I do know kids are able to customize their schedule a little bit among those adjunct teachers.
Mr. Bailey?
The sequence of courses from 9th through 12th grade in science, would I be correct in saying it would be biology, it could be biology, chemistry, physics 1, physics 2? Is that correct? If you wanted physics 2.
Yeah, well, physics 2 being AP level physics, yes.
Okay. Now, those are all year-long courses currently. Are there labs associated with the physics courses?
With the AP physics, there is an additional lab, depending on how they run it, but most of the schools run a lab in addition to the course. Some schools, like South High and North High, that have a 90-minute fourth period are able to do it the way we've always done it, or not always, but for some years have done it. But schools that have 60-minute periods do generally run, at the same time, run a lab class. Some of them are on an A-day, B-day. So you have the physics class every day, and you have the lab every other day.
Well, now that you mentioned it, the long period, the 90-minute period, is band getting back in that long period? Are they scheduling band for the long period?
You mean during fourth period?
Yes.
Actually, I don't think so. I think most of them tend to stick to the last period of the day. If they want to practice after school, they can go right from band, you just stay out there kind of thing. Plus, a lot of band kids want to take those AP science courses.
Yeah.
So if they have that running fourth period, then it would cause a conflict. So.
Thank you.
Are there other questions? Mr. Grunendijk?
Just taking it all the way back to the beginning, pretty much, actually. I see on the courses eliminated, it's the third slide, that there's advanced placement government and politics, advanced placement world history, and advanced placement United States history. Are we replacing those with an equivalent? Or, because I mean, I'm in AP world history right now, and I mean, I think that like government and history courses are really important.
No, great question. We had multiple versions of the same course because we had schools on multiple schedules. And now that we're more universal, that everybody's teaching those AP classes year long, we didn't need some of the extra names we had because we actually had different course numbers so the computer would know whether or not the course was a 2-credit course, semesterized course, or year-long course.
Okay, so those classes are still offered.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm going to ask one question that's, I guess, even more 40,000-foot view. So for an 8th grader, there's a lot in that program of studies. There's a lot to sort through. There's a lot of options on just the kinds of sequences that Mr. Bailey was talking about. What should the contact with the school system look like to help that 8th grader or 8th grader's family figure out what the options are, what the schedule choices that they make as a freshman may impact their opportunities to take classes as sophomores, juniors, seniors? What should that interaction look like, and what systems do we have in place to sort of help those 8th grade parents, as they're making that transition, make good choices?
Typically in January or February, high schools have an orientation just for the parents of 8th graders and the 8th graders themselves. And they present to them sort of an outline of the program of studies. The good thing is freshmen don't have that many options, but it's a good time to start getting them aware, getting those students and their parents to be aware of what options are coming. Freshman year is pretty much filled up with requirements, and maybe you have the opportunity to, say, take band or one other elective course, but pretty much your required courses fill up your schedule. But we do have an orientation. We make them aware of those things. And we also have guidance counselors go down to the middle school and meet with the students in their classes at the middle school and begin that explanation of what credits are, what a completer is, what different completers the school you may be attending. If we're talking about a middle school that feeds more than one high school, then both counselors. Counselors from both high schools will come down because sometimes the completers are a little different from one school to another. So they meet with the counselor for the school, the high school where they will be attending. And so those things are explained to them. We do give then, during the scheduling process for the freshmen, we do give parents a copy of the complete program of studies. We used to re-give it every year, but that's pretty expensive, so we tend to give it to freshmen and to new students now for the last several years. But we do give them a copy of the program of studies. We do give them counseling each year when it comes time to scheduling. And then they do different things like visit Tech High to see if they're interested in those programs their sophomore year, and then they can request a follow-up visit. But I think primarily it's through that scheduling process and through communications.
Okay, that's helpful.
And if I may expound, even in January when we meet with principals and counselors, 8th grade counselors will be in that meeting when we discuss the program of studies and the changes that have been made. In our new counseling model, that is expected for every 8th grade counselor to meet with every 8th grade student and discuss these expectations as Mr. Akers has explained. So it begins with informing the counselors touching those students while they're still in the 8th grade and giving them that information so that they can be informed even prior to their getting to the high school campus.
One of the other things that we do, Dr. Hardings, is early on we ask kids to do some kinds of surveys in terms of what their interests might look like, and then the guidance counselors sit down with those young people in 8th grade and begin having conversations about, if this is what you want to be, here's what the course preparation has to look like. So they begin to outline an academic plan. My daughter has always said that she wanted to be interested. She wanted to go off to college, but she couldn't really define what that meant. And so her guidance counselor, who I think is one of the finest guidance counselors we have, and I'll give her a shout out right now, Mrs. Eck, sat down with Morgan and said, Morgan, if you want to go to a 4-year college or university, let's talk about what kind of college or university. Do you want to go to a Tier 1 research university? Do you want to go to a liberal arts college? Do you want to go? And they kind of went through that, and then they outlined an academic plan that included a pretty rigorous preparation of AP courses, honors courses, advanced, coursework in the IB program and a foreign language area. So I think many of our kids have great academic plans that are outlined for them. Our challenge in the school system is making sure that every kid has an academic plan. And there's a bit of the rub, because oftentimes kids don't know what they want to do, so they fall to a default. We've got to make sure that our default curriculum does not limit them when they do get to that place where they catch fire. Because quite honestly, if you're a young student today and you kind of float through and say, I'm not going to take any foreign language, you've severely limited yourself when it comes time to go into a prestigious college, a 4-year school. If you say that you're not a science kid or you're not a math kid and you don't take math, that's a problem. Now, the state of Maryland has started to move by saying we're going to have a 4-year graduation requirement around mathematics, but there are kids and families who say, well, what's the course of least resistance? That doesn't then leave them prepared if you take consumer math as your 4th-year option for math. So, it's funny because as I go around and talk to parents, I hear a lot of parents who will say to their kids, well, that's okay, I wasn't a good math student either. Now, you never hear somebody say, that's okay, I wasn't a good reader. But we allow people to say, I wasn't a good math student. We've got to change that mentality, and I think we're starting to work towards that with some of our academic plans.
Thank you for that discussion. Are there any other comments or questions on the program of studies? If not, all those in favor of approving the program of studies for 2014-2015? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0. Thank you. Thank you. Next item under new business is the first quarter fiscal 2014 budget adjustments. Mr. South.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, Mr. Superintendent, members of the board. I am here with the requested first quarter budget adjustments for fiscal year 2014. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review the documents that were provided to you in your packet over the weekend. So with that in mind, I'm not going to go through line by line, but there are 4 lines that I would like to, or 4 categories I would like to bring to your attention. The first of those is line 1, the revenue category. In that category, you see we're decreasing revenue by about $1,068,000.
We used savings that we found throughout the various categories to enable us to eliminate the need to use the $1.5 million from fund balance that we had originally planned to use to balance the FY14 budget. That $1.5 million is offset also then by an increase in the state revenue from the net taxable income legislation, and that was realized after the budget was approved. Moving down to line 5, other instructional costs, there you see we're requesting to book a savings in the budget of $172,000 and some change. That's to reclassify the BISFA adjunct faculty from independent contractor status to employee status. Now, as independent contractors, they would be classified in the other instructional cost category. You see the save there because their payroll will now be paid through payroll lines, salary lines, which would be in the instructional salaries category. However, we were able to zero out that instructional salaries category due to some turnover credit and vacancies. Moving down to line 7, capital outlay. We're requesting to book a savings to the budget there of $490,000. This reflects funding for part of the, not the 2012, that is a typographical error, I apologize, the 2014 Barbara Ingram release payment. That will come from excess financing proceeds from way back when we did the original financing, and that is allowable under the terms of the financing agreement. We did not use that excess funding early on in the early years of our payback period because, as you recall, the state decided to contribute an amount equal to our annual liability, and they've done that for the last 3 years. So we will use that $490,000 this year to assist in the payment of those lease payments, and this will be the last year of these savings. So we did keep that amount in the budget, and we're dealing with it as a budget adjustment so that that amount will be in the baseline budget for next year without any adverse effect on the budget. Finally, down in fixed charges, you'll see we're requesting to book a save of approximately $548,000. And this just reflects the reduction in the budgeted health insurance premium from 3% to 1%. As you recall, when the budget was approved, we were expecting a 3% increase in our health insurance premiums, and that amount was later reforecasted and refined to 1%, and that happened after the approval of the budget. That brings us down to a net change in the fund balance of 0, neither a plus nor a minus. And with that, I would be glad to entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. South. Is there a motion to approve the first quarter budget adjustments?
So moved, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mrs. Williams. Is there any discussion? Mrs. Harshman?
I just had one question on line 3, where it says to reflect the cost of an additional school administrator hired to cover for an elementary principal who is on long-term paid medical leave. Was this is there a vice principal in that school? Was there a vice principal in the school?
That particular school is a small elementary school, and I do not believe there is an AP in that school.
Okay, and did we hire from outside, or where did we get the person?
We're utilizing an individual within the school system, and we backfilled that position.
Okay, and then the cost reflects an increase for what? Salary?
Yes. Essentially, we're paying 2 individuals for that position because the one individual is receiving sick pay. The other individual
right, but
is
if
being
the other
paid.
one's in the school system, is he or she not already being paid? Or
yes, they
how's that
were,
working?
but that individual's position was then backfilled.
Oh, okay, I see what you mean. Okay, we don't use interns or anything in situations like that?
That's I think it was expected to be almost a very long-term situation, and that's the reason they opted to put I believe it's an acting principal in that, or an interim principal in that position.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions? Mrs. Fisher?
for the first time ever, I was not able to balance this adjustment out. Help me, which items go in our pocket or in the plus column? Just read off the numbers, would you?
In the plus column, it would be the, well, I assume you mean where we are reducing the budget. Budgeted expenditures would be reduced on line 5, the other instructional costs, on line 7, and on line 8.
Okay, I'll work on my math later.
I'll see you after the meeting. I'll show you how you get there.
Next week.
It balances.
Mrs. Brightby.
It has to balance.
It has to.
I know,
It has
but
to
the
balance.
first time ever, I could not, no matter where I worked the numbers, I couldn't get it to balance.
Now you're making everyone nervous.
No, well, as I always say, was not a math teacher, I was an English teacher.
She
So
does
I
not have a
should-
degree in accounting either, Chris, so you can sit down with her after the meeting. They do balance.
The debt service, capital outlay, number 7.
Yes, ma'am.
You're going to have to help me with that one again. The date is fine, but I'm assuming this was leftover contingency funding from the construction costs?
Yes, ma'am. We borrowed a fixed amount
Understood.
of money, so that was, and it was.
So we've had a balance of $490,000 left over from contingency fund?
Yes, ma'am.
Since, that was, when was BISFA? 5 years ago?
4 or 5 years ago, yes, ma'am.
But you have to remember, you would have left it there because you had at least 3 years of commitments from the state to step in and pay before we would
So
need
it's
that
been
money.
sitting, okay.
So it's been sitting kind of in abeyance, if you will.
Okay, thank you.
Are there other questions or comments? If not, the questions on Mr. Bailey's motion to approve the first quarter budget adjustments. All those in favor? Are there any opposed? Motion passes 7-0, and the student member concurs.
Thank you very
Mr.
much.
Sal. Next on the agenda is personnel action. Ms. Francisco.
Dr. Wilcox, members of the board, there are several personnel actions for your consideration today.
Is there a motion to approve the personnel actions recommended by staff?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Brightman. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Ridenhour. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the personnel actions? Are there any opposed? Abstentions? Motion passes 7-0, and the student member abstains.
Thank you.
And before Ms. Francisco leaves the table, I do want to take this opportunity to introduce perhaps our newest employee in the district. You might be wondering who the woman is sitting back there in the tan colored front in front of Denise Fry. That is Robin Rose. She is our new coordinator of development and community partnerships. Robin, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Board members, I hope you'll take the time to introduce yourselves to her after this meeting. I think you'll find she brings a wealth of experience and it's going to very much help the district. She and I will be sitting down tomorrow to help shape her duties beyond the job description. If you have some suggestions or thoughts that you would like this person to look into for the school system, because you think we've kind of left some things behind in the past, please don't hesitate to share them with Robin, and then she will share them with me, and we'll talk about, can we get them done for the system?
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you. Board member committee reports, curriculum and instruction, Ms. Harshman.
We've had no meeting since the last board meeting.
Finance, Mr. Bailey.
Yes, we met in November. Started with Mr. Sisler sharing with us different accounts that the board has, particularly if they vary by 5% or more one way or the other, and what the reasons might be for that as far as expending the amount budgeted for the various categories. He gave explanations in each instance where there was a question. You passed the quarterly budget adjustments. They were shared with the Finance Committee for first approval. And our third item on the agenda was discussing an RFP for the 403B and the 457 plans, which will be an item coming before the board in the very near future. That concluded our meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Mrs. Fisher, Policy Review and Development.
Policy Committee met November 26th. Besides working on policy IGDK, which we approved on first read earlier today, we reviewed policies that deal with grade point average, graduation requirements, and eligibility, and they will be up for second read on December 17th. We reached consensus that no policy is needed for electronic records and signatures because Maryland law provides for this. However, there will be a set of regulations coming forth. We had a lengthy discussion on GBEE, which is employee use of social media. We sent it back to staff for some additional language. Finally, I'd like to provide a summary of the work of the Policy Committee this year. We have been very active, perhaps more active than any time I can remember in the past. But between January 1st and November 20th, we reviewed a record 57 policies. Of those, we adopted one totally new policy. We updated 14. We reviewed but recommended no major changes to 7 policies. We're still working with 19 policies. In addition to that, each committee member completed individual evaluations of 30 policies in our ongoing test of updating the policy manual. So I want to thank the committee members, Dr. Marco, various staff members that have helped us with language and policy content. A huge thank you, of course, to Mr. Trotta and Ms. Brown, who have worked many, many hours more than I care to try and total up, and have kept me straight at our meetings. We also will be meeting December 10th, I believe at 9 in the morning, to get some things ready for our December 17th meeting.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisher. Mrs. Brightman, Facilities.
Yes, Facilities met on November 26th at the Bester Construction Trailer and had a great tour of Bester. It's all closed in, and they're working to finish. They're putting tiling on, flooring, and painting, and I hope everyone has an opportunity to get by and take a look at it. It's very impressive what they've done, and staff, and I appreciate the management of that. We also discussed West City, the design documents, and some more discussion on the opportunity for value engineering to close the budget gap on that. Discussed some systemic renovation projects and the lack of local funding to leverage state dollars and the need to pick some of those up on our own. Also saw a brief video on solar-powered trash compactors. Sort of interesting, and suggested maybe more information, of course, some cost and maintenance and that sort of thing, but also suggested maybe a pilot run of 1 or 2 of them at the new administrative center. And started a review of the facility policies, and a lot of those are 19 years old. So staff is very interested in working to update those, and we'll start a markup. And I know with the reorganization there may be some changes in the committee makeup, so I'm not sure when the January meeting will be at this time.
And Mrs. Brightman, not to ever correct a board member, but we do not have a budget gap with the new building. We have a design gap.
So you did that last time to
and
me.
It became a front, or not front page, but a back page headline that we had a budget deficit. What we have is designers who have overestimated their ability to deliver a project on budget, but we are getting there.
I didn't even use the word deficit. I used gap this time.
You did.
Still called me on it.
Well, only because I know Mr. Michaels lives and breathes these numbers, and he's not going to let the team at BFM build a project that's bigger than the budget that we have approved.
I understand.
Mr. Ridenhour, Human Resources.
HR did not meet this month. There will be a meeting in December after the reorganization of committees.
All right. Mr. Grunendijk, student government?
Student government has not met since the last board meeting. We will be meeting this Thursday, December 5th at 9:30 a.m. at Washington County Technical High School. We will be holding elections for the new student member of the board intern position. We have 3 candidates running for that position, and so it should be a good competition for that office. Excited to see how it turns out.
Great, thank you. Mrs. Williams, Mrs. Harshman, anything from MABE's conference planning or other committees on which you serve?
Not at this time for me.
Okay, Mrs. Brightman, anything from MABE legislative?
Just a couple. The Board of Directors met on November 20th, and a suggestion was made that the local districts, speaking of policy, start working on policy on the student discipline and code of conduct, because it's coming our way. And we need to probably get ahead of that because the deadline is pretty compressed. Also, an interesting side piece of information, MSDE is discussing amending superintendent certification to allow for non-traditional superintendents. The majority of the May Board of Directors opposed that. The thought was that there is a waiver process in place. What we are going to be doing is looking at ensuring that the waiver process is functioning correctly, and that there is an openness or willingness to entertain the idea of non-traditional superintendents. Just by way of full disclosure, I actually support the recertification, but I was in the minority on that position. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay, I attended the May Budget and Planning Committee meeting on 22 November, where we looked at the May proposed budget for FY14, FY15, I guess it would be, that would go into effect in July of next year. They are calling for a 5% increase in member dues, which would be, of course, applied to all the school systems throughout the state. Otherwise, went into a good bit of detail on a number of their conservative approach to budgeting, places where they're really trying to save. Now that with the supplemental dues that the membership agreed to last October, they feel like they've really dug themselves out of the hole and are now focusing very hard on making sure that they stay there and are proactively planning their budget going forward. It was a very good discussion. The committee unanimously approved sending the budget to the Board of Directors. So if anybody has any questions about what occurred at that meeting, as they said, this committee is the way for all local boards to have input into MAPE's budget now that the membership doesn't vote on the budget. So if you have any thoughts or want any more information, please don't hesitate to ask me. Under committee reports, I also want to thank all of the committee chairs for all of their hard work in the past year. I think, as Mrs. Fisher said, it was a very productive and active year for all of our committees, really, with a number of construction projects going on in facilities, with all the policies that we reviewed, many that we recommended rescinding, which is great. In finance, looking at the 403B and a number of other initiatives. HR, I know, is considered a whole host of new policies, many of which they decided we didn't need a policy for, which is great. And curriculum and instruction, Mrs. Harshman, for all of your work on the, particularly the program of studies that we looked at today and the other activity of the committee throughout the year. So thank you. With that, we will have the forms that members can request committee assignments for the next year are in all of your mailboxes. Haven't had a chance to talk to Mrs. Brightman yet, but my recommendation is going to be that the board officers do not serve as committee chairs. So that will leave one chair for each of the board members to serve as chair of a committee, since there are five members and 5 committees. So if you could please request which committees on which you would like to serve, if there are any committees which you would particularly like to share. I will do my best in consultation with Mrs. Brightman to make sure that we try to get everybody their first choices. We will also need somebody to serve on 3 committees. Mr. Bailey's been kind enough to do that in the last year and the last couple of years, actually. If anybody would like to serve on 3 committees, I think we would welcome that. So,
I would
Mrs.
like to volunteer to do that.
Okay, well,
Hey.
that's great. If you'll indicate your preference of the 3, I can't guarantee to get you all 3, but we'll do our best. Thank you for offering to do that. So those will all be in your boxes. If you could get those to me by, I'll say maybe next Tuesday. If you could get them, you can email me what you think, or you can put them in the box, because I think my intention would be to get those new committee assignments on the agenda for December 17th. Okay. All right, we haven't had agenda planning yet, so I really don't have any future agenda items to discuss. That brings us to board member comments. Mr. Grunendijk?
Nothing.
Mrs. Harshman?
Nothing.
Mrs. Williams?
I have nothing at this time.
Mr. Bailey?
I can't add anything.
Mrs. Fisher?
Just that it's been a very full and interesting day, starting at 8:30 this morning.
Mrs. Brighton?
Yeah, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Bailey for his year of service as Vice President. And I hope I can call on you for advice going forward.
It's cheap.
It's cheap. And I hope you'll mentor me in my year coming forward. So I appreciate your effort. Thank you.
Quite welcome.
Mr. Ryder?
Just very simply like to thank Dr. Harding for an outstanding year. Some good things have happened this year, as have happened over a long period of time. I'm very proud to be a part of this organization. And I wish Donna the best of everything as Vice President. I think she will do an outstanding job. And I'm looking forward to you guys keeping the momentum going.
Well, thank you, and I too want to particularly thank Mr. Bailey for being my friend and partner the last year as a member of the board officers. It's been a pleasure working with you, and I can think of nobody who can better keep me in line as far as anything having to do with public education than you. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for your friendship. I want to thank Mrs. Brightman as well for being willing to serve. I look forward to working with you in the year ahead. I think we have a lot to work on, but I think with your experience and the things that you bring to this board, I hope that we can make a great team to support the members of this organization and the members of this board.
I look forward to serving with you to serve all of our colleagues.
And that's finally for me. I want to thank all of my colleagues for the opportunity to serve the next year. And as I said last year, if there is anything that you think that I can do to better serve the board or to better serve its members, or to make sure that all members have the information they need to make the decisions that they need to make, I hope none of you will hesitate to let me know. So if there are no other comments and no other business, I'll declare the meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.